All right. Hi, everyone. So good to see you. Thank you so much for coming, and welcome to Tempest Gallery. My name is 𝘾𝙖𝙞𝙩. I am the Director of Programs, working alongside Daphne and Chris. Just to get started, I'm going to go over kind of like the curatorial vision, some of the theoretical underpinnings, that brought this work together, and then I'm going to hand it over to the artists. So just to begin, 𝘎𝙧𝙪𝙢 it's an Arabic word meaning wonders or marvels. In a historical and literary context, it refers to the strange, the mysterious, and miraculous things, often things that lie at the edge of understanding. In the 13th century Islamic and Persian traditions, 𝘎𝙧𝙪 was a key concept. In 𝘎𝙧𝙪 Wonders of Creation, an encyclopedic text by 𝘎𝙖𝙢𝙢𝙮 �al-Khwarizmi, circa, 1203 to 1283. And this described the fantastical creatures, strange lands, and natural phenomena. Like any good cosmography, it describes what was present on both Earth and in the heavenly realms, blending both science, mythology, and imagination. What's interesting about this encyclopedic text is that in order to share it, one had to physically rewrite it. And this was a way of passing knowledge between generations. But we have to point out that copying and rewriting wasn't merely like a automatic process in the way that we can digitally mediate now. It was also an act of engaging with the unknown, interpreting it, and making it one's own. In a creative sense, 𝘎𝙧𝙪 it represents a way of grappling with the unfamiliar, the undefined, and the mysterious, in a way that just feels out of reach of human comprehension. And I will say specifically, it was chosen by Daphne as a way to add an asterisk to this phenomenon of this medieval cosmography, which inspired centuries of artistic interpretation, enriched by cultures and beliefs of artists who retold the story in their own tongue. Perhaps artists have always reflected on continuous recycling of ideas, images, and stories. The feeling is that things have been repeated for thousands of years, like myth, religion, and philosophy, as a way to coincide with the feeling that everything is both new and idiosyncratic at the same time, but forged from let's say, the embers of a contemporary fire or wreck. By tapping into this deep wellspring of myth, these two ideas circle one another to overlap and coexist. Now, I'd like to turn it over to the artists who are here with us today to introduce themselves and their practices.
Okay, my name is Aruni. I'm a textile artist. The pieces that I have here today are this piece over here titled Blue Girl, and then in the back with the 3 heads is called Dream Body. Is there anything else you want me to?
That's good. Yeah, it's good to start. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Rhonda. I also primarily work with textiles. I have a bunch of work in here. I have the pieces on the back wall, the 2 pieces directly in front of me, and the 2 pieces over here.
Sammy Bennett. I'm an interdisciplinary artist working between painting, printmaking, and installation. And the vase piece is mine, and then the red one on the wall as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So I guess my first 2 questions are kind of connected to this theme, which is why I had to explain it. 𝘎𝙧𝙪 can be interpreted as an encounter with the strange and the unknown. And I was just curious, in what ways does this connect with your own art? How do you see your practice engaging with mystery and transformation, the edges of one's understanding? And how do you use materials to navigate or reinterpret the unknown? Light, easy questions to start us off.
I can go first. I think that in my work, I'm definitely working with the unknown. I look at a lot of mythology and folklore when I'm making, and I'm really pulling directly imagery from artworks that represent mythologies, whether they're coming from Buddhism or from the Arthurian legends, but I'm very interested in transformation, like the ability for a human to transform their, I guess their psychological states or their lived reality through their psychological states. And so that sort of transmutation is like what I'm really pulling at, using sort of like strange imagery like 3 heads or like your chest bursting open. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of mystery in working with textiles, just in that they can be unpredictable, and also that in my practice I let the process guide my work. So more than often the end result is always a mystery to me. But there's usually a starting point, which is either material or repeat pattern or print. And from there, I keep working and reworking the fabric. In a lot of ways, I feel like the fabric has lived many lives by the time I've reached its final form. It's always surprising to me what happens. I use a lot of draping techniques in my work, and working off of a body with draping techniques, I have a certain image of how it will turn out. But then once I put it up, gravity often takes over, and I will realize things like, oh, actually this piece works much better totally upside down, or things like that. So I think a lot of why I like to work with textiles is because there's inherent mystery in it.
Yeah, I'm kind of similar in the same way, where a lot of the fabric I use is found fabric, whether it be handed down or off the street. And I like the idea of taking a ratchet strap and then transforming it into a vine or a leaf. And you can kind of see where the initial fabric is, but then you don't actually know. So I think there's that kind of abstraction that happens in the transforming of material. And also taking this this fabric that was a doily or something that someone gave away to secondhand store. And now you put it on a pedestal, and now it's capital A art. So I like that low high kind of visual culture too.
Okay, great. Well, so I have you here, so I have to ask you this question, which is, in the wonders of creation, it sought to document everything in the known world. And something that that has emerged through my own practice is art making becomes this kind of invention of a visual language, or invention of symbols and motifs that you work with. So I'm just curious, if you were to create your own encyclopedia of all that is, what are those figures, motifs, symbols that come through?
I guess I can speak to this a little bit in my printmaking practice. I have what I call a family of patterns, and they kind of evolve and grow over time. They often start from probably a small drawing, or even sometimes I will, make a bigger drawing. I only like a certain aspect of it. I pull that aspect and it becomes a repeat print. And so over time, these different kind of symbols have I let them evolve, and I let their meaning present themselves to me in a lot of ways. So definitely it would be a lot of those symbols in my encyclopedia, and it's interesting to think of, what they could mean to me. They could mean something else to someone. It's very specific the language that you use in your work.
Do you start from images, or do you start from abstract, or do you know what I'm saying? What is it? What are those icons?
I start from usually they're drawings that I've made, and my drawing practice is more of a personal part of my practice that I don't share as much. So it kind of enters my work through those prints and patterns.
Lovely.
I relate to that. I also have a drawing practice, so I create a lot of sketches, and I am looking at a lot of imagery, so I love seeing old religious paintings. I love Indian miniatures. So I look at a lot of stuff, and then I'll just like draw kind of like automatic drawing, like my own things. And I feel like I'm trying to create my own mythology through using like these symbols that have like been handed down for thousands of years. But I guess like in my encyclopedia would be like suns and moons and nagas and yeah.
What's a naga?
It's kind of like a serpent being. They're really interesting because they can transform between human and serpent, so they can appear as like a human being, and they can appear as a snake. And then sometimes they're in like the transition phase where they're half snake, half human. And I just like love like the transformative quality to that. But then also, you know, snakes shed skin. That like in the Bible, like in the biblical story, they're the catalyst for humans gaining knowledge, wisdom. So yeah, I feel like they're such an important figure in like our history.
Absolutely. And we see it even in this piece that's right behind us. The woman holding two snakes, but you have her holding a flower instead of a snake in one hand. So yeah, that's really interesting.
I like the shedding of skin for a snake. It's a good metaphor. Yeah, I have like Dalmatians appear a lot in my work that come from, I mean, I'm also a screen printer, so I think patterns lend very easily to that type of practice. I haven't made one in a minute, but recently the 𝘿𝙝𝙪 2 Pokemon has been showing up all last year and this year in my work as well. And it's like, I just think he's like a half frog, half onion type of animal. And in the story of like the cartoon, he was on this like protective part of this ranch where like Pokemon who had been abused were like being like rehabilitated. So he was kind of their protector in a way. So like one of the characters goes to try to catch one and 𝘿𝙝𝙪 gets in the way, and then it's like this ongoing thing. But he eventually catches them and he comes on to his gang and into the story. So I like 𝘿𝙝𝙪 as this like kind of protector kind of thing. Let's see, I have a lot of chains and bricks too. I think living in the city, the brick is just like in our face no matter what. And it's yeah, a metaphor for the people and the places we go here. And then I like the chain as like this breaking thing that can break. You can kind of like be bound, but then like kind of escape that as well. So yeah, and then playing with Dickies too a lot. I like take those off clothings and we'll sew those into my work as a way to like re-own that kind of imagery in a way. Yeah, I have too many probably. Should narrow it down.
Yeah, I mean, something that I notice in your work is that it's like the things that represent being in a city, but also like juxtaposed with like a kind of domestic intimacy. So you have this kind of interior, exterior, like I'm a participant in a city, but I'm also like creating the environment, participating in the environment. For
sure, yeah. I think it's finding your subjective individual voice in the context of this like craziness kind of thing. Where if you don't like have something to say or like plant your roots, you'll just be like swept away, I feel like. Which is that intimate, domestic kind of.
Interesting, interesting. And okay, so another question I have is, one of the many benefits of being in a group show like this is that you get to see your work in conversation with other artists. And I'm just curious, in being in this context, do you feel as if your work is in conversation? Are there works that you admire? Like, what do you think about, what stands out to you about the exhibition?
I definitely feel like the works are in conversation with each other. I mean, whether it's from like the processes we choose and the materials we choose are in conversation with each other, or just even like like I was saying, that these two pieces to me look like they're trying to hold hands. I can't explain why I feel that way, but they're just like reaching towards each other. And I think that just like, yeah, I feel that it really feels like they're in harmony with each other, their works.
Yeah, I feel like our patterns definitely have overlap, and then like our still lifes have a lot of overlap.
Yes. Like color and yeah, it feels very cohesive.
It's a colorful exhibition, Daphne.
Cool. So another question that I have is, everyone in this group has mentioned that you're drawn to fiber arts because of its connection to the body, the domestic, and to touch. I was just curious, what emotions or atmosphere do you aim to capture in your work, and how do you hope that people who engage with it will feel?
For me, I definitely I love textile art because I feel like it relates to our everyday. You know, it's like we're all wrapped in fabric right now. Yeah, like it's on everything that our body touches, whether it's like the couches we sit on or the bed we lay in. And there's like that level of comfort and familiarity. I think it's like disarming in many ways. And so you can have like pretty intense conversations with it because of that level of comfort. So I want there to be that like aspect of familiarity, memory, comfort. And I do love that, like when I'm working with fabric, sometimes like when I was like beading that piece back there was like a point where I was like really tired and I just like dragged it onto the bed with me and I had it like laying on top of me and I'm just like sewing the beads in. So like, yeah, like I love like being able to like climb on top of it and like work on it or like have it wrapped around me.
It's so lovely because you're kind of like building the experience of being covered by it into the work.
Even washing it, like it feels like it's like a being in certain ways, like the way I take care of
Absolutely.
the pieces. Like, yeah.
Well, and I feel that art always, it feels alive in some way. So you're like almost relating to that spirit present within the material.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the kind of power that comes with the sense of familiarity of textiles, and that you can really have conversations with textiles in a way that simply isn't possible with other materials. And I think there's a sort of soft power to textiles. Literally, it can really, I think that the emotions that I want people to get out of any given work, obviously the material plays a huge role in that, but I would say that like, just because something's familiar, I don't feel like people necessarily take a positive or like warm, fuzzy feeling away from it, that it actually can be violent or disturbing or evoke ideas that make you think about things that aren't necessarily comfortable to think about. And
can you give us an example? Or is there anything here?
No, I think actually this piece was one big piece at one point, because when I had started it, I was kind of grappling with the earthquakes that had happened in Western Syria and Turkey. And as I worked with it over time, this sort of like very dark, looming, large piece felt, especially recently, because I'm feeling much more optimistic about things in Syria as of late, it felt like too oppressive. It was too much, and that was when I decided to cut it up, and it became, several smaller pieces. But even the color, the movement of the fabric, and then what other materials are added to it can really shape the feelings behind textiles.
Yeah, knowing that, I feel like I'm seeing, I love knowing that they're originally connected because it feels like you can feel the separation and almost like pulling apart of something that should have been having like a common unity at one point. But they remind me of armor. They remind me of like skin that's been tarnished in some way.
Yeah, I definitely get that. I think armor comes up a lot in my work because I'm using like garment construction methods, so people will see the body in it, and yeah, that comes up a lot.
I love that about textiles, or you have a big piece and you're just like, we gotta cut this out.
Yeah, it's not working for me anymore.
Yeah, like with painting, you gotta like sand and like re-gesso, or I don't know, you gotta like scrub away or add a lot. That's what I love with fabric. You can take a seam ripper or just a blade and just make these instant kind of edits that are really fast. That I think working in kind of like a collage aesthetic kind of helps to just let you kind of do your thing. Yeah, I think, I mean, I always try to make my work moody. I always try to like get a feeling like you get from like a love song or something. I don't think I always get it, but I try to like put that in there. And I like the idea, like I guess what you all were both talking about, of like textile is such a relatable material. It's a nice easy way in for viewers to kind of at least take one step into the work, because we all, yeah, like wear it, it's kind of around us. But then you can kind of either like flip it on the viewer or like go deeper in kind of in a way, because it is this like soft thing, but then you can talk about like a really heavy topic. And I kind of always like that hard and soft kind of thing, which is why like I put like the chains or like the fire. It's kind of this, yeah, this kind of flipping back and forth. Kind of like, I mean, I hate to say his name, but like how like Koons will make like an inflatable sculpture heavy in like a bronze. Like I like to do that same thing. I'm making this like thing that's supposed to be a vase that's like unbreakable, but like we could knock that over right now and it would just bounce off the floor. You know, it'd be kind of okay. So yeah, it kind of always goes back to the transforming of like materials for me.
But I also feel like with this work, and this work in particular, it's like something of an elevating of in some cases, certainly the pedestal and the things on the floor, like a detritus that's being elevated as like the stand upon which a work of art exists. So I'm also seeing like kind of like the history to perhaps like a kind of classicism that you're merging with like an urban like environment in some ways.
For sure, yeah. Like that was the first pedestal I made, and yeah, nothing against wet pedestals, but they're boring, and you know, I don't think the programming here wants any white pedestals, which is great. So I made a good challenge, but yeah, but then it's also like look at the ground too, or like look at the corner of the gallery you like normally don't look at. Just trying to make viewers to like come into the gallery and just look in different places than they normally would, to just get a different experience of some sort.
With the pedestal in particular, I feel like when I came over, I wanted to like stick my head in that little window because I'm just so used to walking by a construction site and doing exactly that. So yeah, for what it's worth. But excellent, thank you so much. I wanted to also ask, who are your artistic ancestors? What does your creative genealogy look like?
I like to look at a lot of different craft histories. I really like the Mamluk era, specifically in terms of both paper-related craftsmanship and textile-related craftsmanship. In terms of contemporary artists, Mona Hatoum and Jumana Manna are two huge influences on me. And Nancy Sparrow's printmaking practice also is a huge influence on me.
Lovely.
I definitely look at like a lot of religious and spiritual art, like historically. And I'm also looking at like contemporary artists as well, like Moki Cherry. I really love her work. I also love like looking at like Tibetan thangka paintings, and then Suchitra Matai, who's also like incredible textile artist. Yeah, these are definitely artists I'm looking at.
Contemporary artists for the vase piece is definitely like 𝘾𝙖𝙞𝙩 𝙍𝙚. Does a lot of great ceramic work with vase and putting like a bunch of imagery on it. I think like looking Paula Wilson, also contemporary textile artist, painter, printmaker, I really like. And then diving into like my own personal history of like using there's like an embroidery from my grandma like on that piece, and like kind of old craft things that my mom and grandma and like family friends did. And then kind of like illuminated manuscripts as well, which kind of tie into this show slightly. I always love all the like perverse imagery and like just the idea of like monks doodling like in the margins, like I don't know, however many centuries ago. It's like something we all did, I think, in high school, you know, as artists, all the doodles. That's when like some good things can come out. So.
It's interesting to look and be inspired by like artifacts that had like a religious significance, because they had almost like a utility of like reverence, and they would like exist in like places of worship. Are you inspired by like and to both of you, like, is it imagery or is it you know, approach, or is it merely like a connection with something beyond?
I think it's like all of that. Yeah, like I'm definitely interested in like what they were thinking about, you know, like when it comes to like these notions of like transformation, or like how to change your life or whatever. Like it kind of feels like self-help books, just like from thousands of years ago in a way. Like they're trying to like figure out what it meant to be human, which like we're still doing, you know, so that's like fascinating to me. And then like, yeah, there's all these like strange, like, it's like the body has its own geology, like there's like all this like mapping that's taken place, which I find fascinating. Yeah, I don't know. I guess there is like an aspect of like their personality comes out too. Like, who were these people?
Yeah,
like
they're perverts.
like like a bunch of like little freaks. Like,
yeah, you can lock yourself away and study religion, but like you know, I think it's always there. Yeah. I mean, the cave drawings, you know, those have like they're killing bulls, but then there's also other naughty stuff in there too. And those were like some of the first recorded drawings. I mean, I don't know. I'm not
What else is there to represent? That's a good question. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to ask one last question, and then I'm going to ask the audience, if you have questions, get them ready, so we can ask folks while we have the artists here. So finally, I'm curious about kind of like your early artistic lives. I'm curious, how did your childhood foster creativity, and who were the people in life that helped open these doors of perception for you?
I know it was definitely, family. Just growing up around, like in the Midwest, around like my mom and grandma, like I was saying, we were always quilting and doing needlework. But then like my grandpa was like working on the engine all the time, so there was always this like tinkering that I feel like was going on around me.
Sorry, what engine?
I mean, he drove like an 18-wheeler, but then he also like would outboard motors for like boats too. So like just like your quintessential Midwest blue collar. But he was soldering calculators for a side job, like just doing all this kind of like, making. So I think, and that's like a big part, it's just like the physically doing process. Just getting in the studio and cutting, printing, whatever you gotta do.
Absolutely.
I relate to that. Like my mom and my grandma were definitely like, they loved to cook, and they loved to like make us clothing and stuff like that. So it was like very utilitarian, but there was like a lot of crafting. And then like my dad loved like bringing things in that he like found and like spray painting them, like refurbishing.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of that as well.
I had kind of the opposite experience where even my grandma, who was trained under, crafts, just like masters in sewing, she sort of, it's actually really strange, she won't acknowledge that she knows how to do all this like sewing, needlepoint, or embroidery. And it's like this really strange relationship that happened between like what is considered like educated urban work versus village rural work. And this is in Damascus specifically. So she's like embarrassed that she knows how to do these things, which is just so wild to me because it's like knowledge that she could pass down to me. And so that's one of my grandmas. My other grandma was not trained, but she is the one who outed her. She's like, your grandma knows how to do all these things, you should talk to her. And I was like, but then my mom like signed me up for sewing classes when I was 10 or 11 because there was just like total void of any hand skills in my family at that point. And then just kind of kept doing it, like started out with quilting, graduated to garment making, thought I was going to do fashion for a while, but then ultimately found fiber art as the path I wanted to pursue.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Does anyone have a question? Naomi?
I have a question for Louis. So until now, I'd only seen your work on Instagram, so it's really cool to see it in person. And these two pieces in particular, given my cultural background, immediately make me think of contact quilting, which I'm sure you've heard of. And with that being said, I'm curious what your, how you source your materials, like whether they're recycled or not, or wherever you get them from, and just like your process from sourcing the materials to building them up, and like the role of intuition.
Yeah, so I'm sourcing the materials primarily from like things that I've collected, like whether it's like old clothing, things I'm getting from thrift stores, or things my friends are giving me. I've also been going to Fab Scrap, which I don't know if you guys are familiar, it's great. It's just textile waste from like the fashion industry. And so using a lot of recycled materials, really. And it is very intuitive. I generally choose materials based on color. I've like started to use pattern, which is like slightly newer. I primarily like to like just paint on my own patterns, but yeah, so it's a process of like working with a drawing or a sketch that I've made, and then after I've created like a lot of sketches, if I'm ready to work with it, I'll kind of like pull out all of my fabrics and start to like take them apart and cut out all the shapes. It is really similar to Kantha. In Sri Lanka we have something sort of similar. I don't know what they call it, but it is like this sort of applique process, and they'll actually embroider the edge, which I don't do. I like kind of just like leave them bare. But yeah, I would say that like once I'm starting to work on the actual textile, it's like very intuitive and kind of based on what the material wants to do. As I think you were saying earlier, like they have a life of their own and they'll like respond to whatever you're doing, yeah.
Lovely. Anyone else?
I'm curious about like the use of, because I read Arabic, I'm Arab, and so when I first came in and saw the vibe, I was trying to decipher what is it about. Like, I was very curious. So, why did you choose to write it in Arabic? Is it because the show it's called 𝘼𝙧𝙪, like 𝘼𝙧 in Arabic? And when you explained it about the Pokemon, and it made sense to me because I was like, what is it passport? And I'm not reading it correctly. So tell me, how did you come about like from the Midwest to an Arabic word? Like that's like flash of civilization.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I just typed in like what 𝘿𝙖𝙞𝙩 was in Arabic and then painted it on there, kind of thing.
So you don't speak Arabic?
No, absolutely not. I guess,
Made an effort.
yeah, you can call it appropriation if you want. Yeah.
But you live in New York, so it's fine.
Yeah. It was just kind of responding to the show a little bit. And yeah, taking that in, but combining it with, like, there's actual, like, I was thinking of 𝘿𝙖𝙞𝙀, and then if you look around the vase, there's images from the 𝘎𝙧𝙪 in there, and it's like a half frog, half thing, so I was kind of like being like, if 𝘿𝙖𝙞𝙀 is a descendant from this book, who would be his descendants, or its descendants, and so that's why there's a half dragon and like this half toad thing. So yeah, it's just kind of a way of like recycling and trying to...
I think that's funny because I also spent like a good 8 hours while I was installing here trying to figure out what on earth that said. And then when Stephanie was like, oh, it says 𝘿𝙖𝙞𝙀, I was like, what? And I was like, oh yeah, it does say that. Like, it's like funny, I don't know, I would have never gotten there. But
funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, I didn't paint it perfectly, so maybe there's like a little wonkiness. But
I read it immediately, but I also know 𝘿𝙖𝙞𝙀's name. And
Yeah,
like,
that is
I see it right
another
there.
thing.
Yeah, that's the clue.
yeah, and I mean, I used the Japanese card too as another way of mixing, of like the name can be in multiple languages, but it's like the 𝘿𝙖𝙞𝙀 pathway. Yeah.
Any other questions?
So everyone has talked about how the fabric has another life before you start working with it. And I'm curious for everybody if this is like the final form of this fabric or if it continues to have a life after it's in a gallery and kind of transforms into something else.
I do think that the space will often force you to make decisions with the textile that you just don't have that flexibility in other mediums. You can't really, because it's like a painting that's stretched, you can't like decide to unstretch it on the spot and like, you know, hang it in a different way. But with textiles, like you can really respond to the space. Personally, I hope that this is the final form of these works. And like I try to resist the urge of like disassembling works to make new works. That sometimes is hard, especially with my larger installations. Yeah, I think this is for these ones are really fresh, so I can't you know guarantee that they'll stay the same, but the rest I hope they will.
I feel like once I pay a photographer to take a photo of the thing, it's usually going to stay that. But yeah, I've had large installations that I just chopped up and made into like sewed onto clothes or something too, because it's just material and you only have so much space.
Yeah, I've definitely cannibalized old work, but if I like really love it and yeah, it's been photographed, just hold on to it.
Yeah.
But there's always that possibility.
I always thought with textiles I would never run out of space, but I have actually run out of space. So.
Do you keep your stuff in bins?
I keep a lot of work actually on hangers because that just, I happen to have a good sized closet in my studio. And then I roll them up on like tubes.
Okay.
Yeah, tubes are the way to go.
Tubes, yeah.
'Cause there's no wrinkles or folds in big pieces of fabric. There's this like sidetrack, but there's this like story of like Rembrandt. In his later years, they commissioned him to this big mural, and then he painted this like really muddy image that they didn't like, and so they were like, take it back, and he actually cut it up to try to like pieces of it to try to make 3 pieces from this big one. And I've always kind of thought of that in terms of cutting up my work of like, well, you know, this like little spot is actually really good and can make a piece, and like I'll just do it, you know. And no one really keeps a track.
We're not holding you to it.
Yeah, if you're not, you know, if there's no
Yeah.
gallery representation, it's like kind of like, well, yeah, whatever, you know.
Yeah. Anyone else? No, thank you so much for coming, everyone.
Thank you.
I think we have pastries and some drinks, so please help yourself.
You almost need to put it in like a Loctite and then not know the code. Be like, put it away. Be like, I can't touch
And
this.
access it. It's a time capsule.
Congrats, guys. That was really great.
Thank you.
Good job, Caitlin.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yay! How much longer is the show up for?
I think today's the last day.
Today's the last day? Oh my god. Okay.
Yeah, today is the day.
Okay, we'll take all the pictures.
Yeah, get it out. We gotta get it out of here.
You're like, I'm taking it home with me
I was
today.
wondering actually if I was going to